evening, everyone. It's Sunday night, 10 p.m. As usual, it's the APAT show. Leigh, I'm really excited this evening. We have somebody very, very special on the virtual sofa. Tell us who.
We do. We have the one and only Dara O'Kearney on the show. Good evening to you, Dara. We've caught you just on the break, haven't we, before you're about to go back playing a bit of poker?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. It's a Sunday, obviously, and I'm at home, so doing a Sunday grind. Few less tables than normal because I want to leave some brain cycles to talk to you guys.
I can't believe he's leaving money on the table, Leigh, to talk to us. That's just such a bad... It's a minus EV decision, that, isn't it?
Absolutely, I completely agree. But we're obviously it's a Sunday night, so as well as Dara playing, there's obviously a load going on GGPoker tonight. The big Vegas satellite, 12 packages up for grabs tonight. We had a lot of fun watching this last week, so we're going to have that up in the background whilst we're chatting to Dara, and he's playing as well. It's the Road to Vegas promotion. Dara just said before we just came live, he was looking at the players on that table that we had up on the screen. He says there's a lot of big name players there on that, because obviously you'll have played against quite a few of these, I presume, regularly with the schedules you play, but also when you've been playing these satellites yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Matas has been around for a long time, and he's actually a very, very good satellite player. And Sylvain loosely, obviously, I played quite a bit both online and live as well, and so it's pretty sick to see them side by side.
Pretty stacked.
Yeah.
We watched this one last week, Dara, this particular sat. Obviously, a bunch of seats. How many seats up for grabs, Leigh? It was 12 last week. How many up in this one?
It's 12 again this week. So
12
just to
again
give you
this
guys they're down to 23 at the moment. 120 players started it. It's overlaid a little bit, not too much, about 10k overlay in this one. So we're down to 23, 12 being paid. They're playing an average stack of about 13 bigs at the moment. Now, we know last week that dropped down to, I think it was on the bubble. It was about 4 bigs, I think, by the time we got to the bubble last week.
Yeah, and I must admit, we're in the middle of the show last week. We're watching this unfold in front of us. There's 12 seats up for grabs. People are down to a big blind. And we thought, how the fuck is this happening? And lots of big names. We were sort of looking through some of the win rates on GG, some big winners there. But yet people are down to 2 blinds, 3 blinds. They're holding on. Didn't seem that scientific. And we thought, right, we know what we've got to do, right? We've got to get Dara on, because if anyone can explain how to get through the early, mid, late stages of something like this, it's Dara. Right, based on your great history in terms of producing a lot of content, a lot of strategy work around this sort of stuff. So we thought it'd be super interesting. I guess the first question would be, one-off events, Dara. Is there an optimal way to play them, or can you only really play optimally over a larger sample?
The thing with satellites is that for the most part, for most of the tournament, you just play them a little bit tighter than you would a normal tournament. Because you're not aiming for first place. If there's 12 seats, you're aiming for 12th. Same price for first as for 12th. And that affects every part of the strategy. But when you get down to the death, it really changes the strategy completely. Like in a normal tournament, good players would normally never let themselves drop down to even 5 big blinds. They'd be all in before then to try and get out of that situation. But in a satellite, it's often the case that, you might have 5 big blinds, but if you're on the bubble and there are 2 other guys with 3 big blinds, there's absolutely no point in risking your 5 big blinds until they've taken their stand. So it's almost like a slow bicycle race where you see people doing nothing for as long as they can, so long as there are other people ahead of them who are going to have to be all in first. One of the best feelings in a satellite is to win, to get a seat with like a quarter of an ante or something, and that happens. Sometimes you go down that low, on the other side of the thing, people sometimes, it feels weird because it feels like you're just sort of letting what happens to others decide your fate, but that's often your best shot. The very first time I qualified for the World Series main event was back in 2008 or so. And I remember there was over 1,000 runners and there were 54 seats. And I was pretty short the whole way. So I kind of a tense satellite the whole way out. Like I never really had a stack. But but then I got lucky with about 60 left, and I got a double, which kind of made me safe. But I was still raiding the bubble when there was 55 left, and I saw that there was a guy on another table who had literally like 1/4 of an ante. He posted his ante, and after he folded, he had a 1/4 left, so he was going to be all in next hand. So I thought, okay, well, that's good. I mean, the satellite's basically over now because even if he somehow wins the next hand, he's only going to, he'll still only have an ante or a little bit more than an ante. So he's as good as gone. But then on my table, the most amazing hand happened. Chip leader was on my table. Like he had a pile of chips, and he was obviously enjoying the bubble. He was just opening every hand, and so he opened. And then the guy who was in third place overall, the other big stack on the table, he defended the big blind, which I immediately thought, well, this is weird. Like, what's the upside to this?
Yeah.
And then the flop came something like King 4-3, and I think it went check, bet by the bigger stack, and then just shoved by the other guy. And the really big stack tanked for a while and eventually called. And he had pocket aces. He actually had a hand this time. And the other guy had pocket kings, so he flopped top set. But it came runner wheel for the aces to knock out the kings. So the guy with a 1/4 of an ante on the other table literally got a $14,000 package because the kings couldn't bring himself to fold kings pre-flop. And then when he hit the nuts on the flop, he thought, well, okay, now I can just shove, and what could possibly go wrong?
Bloody hell.
But yeah, I always think that that's the biggest illustration of just how different satellites are. Like if that was a normal tournament, you just say, oh, the kings are very unlucky there. But the kings made a fairly big mistake there at literally every point in the hand. He should have just folded pre-flop.
Yeah.
And then he certainly shouldn't have gone all in on the flop when he had the nuts at that point, but not the unbreakable nuts.
Yeah. So I guess what you're saying there, Dara, what I'm reading from that is that there are times that late in a tournament, a satellite, where it's absolutely the right thing to fold kings, to probably fold aces if you have to. The question that I posed last week to the guys was, at what stage do you hit that? I mean, if you're on the stone cold bubble, yes. But I mean, if there's, if you're 5 to a seat, 5 drops to a seat, are you folding that premium a hand and hanging on in there? Is it a pure mathematical exercise?
Yeah, it's largely a mathematical exercise. One very good rule of thumb is how many players. Say there are 12 seats. How many players are outside those at the moment compared to how far inside you are? So if there's 14 left, the top 10 are all reasonably locked up. Because even if the guys in 13th and 14th double up, the guys, that's just going to move the guys in 11th and 12th down, and the other guys are still going to maintain a top 12 position. So that's kind of an important number to look how many there are between you and the number of seats. So if you're fifth, let's say, and there are 12 seats, then there are 7 people between you and essentially the bubble spot.
Yeah.
And if there's less than 19 players left, in other words, if there's less than 7 players on the other side of that, you're reasonably locked up, and you should just be pretty much just folding. As you get very, very close, it gets a little bit more complicated. Like sometimes, for example, there might be 12 seats, and the top 8 might be all reasonably locked up. They're well clear of the others, and then the other 5 are fairly level. So essentially, what's happening then is it's a new satellite where those 5 are competing for 4 seats, and one is going to be the bubble boy. And you just kind of have to ask yourself the question, like, in any given spot, given that it's 4 from 5 are going to win seats, I'm roughly 80% for a seat if I just fold. So I shouldn't really be getting involved unless I think I'm going to win more than 80% of the time. And that's the thing we went into in detail in the first book I did with Barry, Poker Satellite Strategy. It's a concept we call COC, chance of cashing. You basically try and work out your chances of cashing at any given time. Early on in the tournament, you do it by working out what percentage of the target stack you have. So, like if you start with 10,000 in chips and 1 in 10 is getting a seat, then the average when the seats go out will be 100,000. So if you get to like 70,000, let's say you're 70% of the way. So you roughly 70% chance of cashing. But on the bubble, the maths changes quite a bit. You can't really use that method anymore. You have to just sort of look where you are in relation to other people and do the calculation. Now, the top players are very good at that. They can just kind of look at the situation and go, yeah, I think I'm about 70% here, or I think I'm 90%, or whatever the number is. But it is the kind of thing you can sort of like practice and get good at on the fly.
Wow. And tell me, Dara, just taking it back to the early stage of a satellite. So you said earlier that, of course, you can play it differently, maybe more conservatively, given that you're not looking for first. In this instance, you're looking for any place in the top 12. It's a wider landing target, if you like. But would it make sense under any circumstances to attack the early levels of a satellite to try and build a stack to make you safer when you get to that key finishing sort of stage?
I think the only circumstance where that might be a good idea is if the rest of the table is just playing ridiculously tight and just not taking any risks at all. And then poker's a game of opposites. If everybody else is playing tight, there's a lot of equity to be gained from playing loose. And if everybody else is playing very loose, there's a lot of equity to be gained from knitting it up. But in practice, I think most people play the early stages too loose anyway. So all you're kind of really doing is just getting into the trenches with them in a spot where there's no real upside to having a big stack at the end. Like a lot of the upside for being aggressive at the start of tournaments is that if you do get a stack, then you can attack the bubble. You can attack the final table bubble. You can get to the final table with a big stack, and you can potentially win first prize, which is much bigger than the min cash. But in a satellite, the min cash is the bubble, and first prize is essentially the same for everybody, whether you come in first or 12th or wherever. And I think the reason why people often think, well, I'd like to play aggressively at the start and not have to worry, is that satellite bubbles are very, very stressful. They're just about the most stressful thing imaginable because, 13 people left, one of those is going to miss out. And if you're one of the short stacks, maybe it's going to be like you are one of 2 other people. And that's extremely stressful. And people want to kind of avoid that stressful situation. But that still doesn't make it right to sort of play too aggressive early on. A thought experiment I sometimes get people to do is that imagine if instead of, say, a satellite for a World Series main event seat, with 100 people started and 12 seats, imagine it was a satellite where 100 people start and the first 88 people eliminated are going to be killed, as in like taken outside and shot. I think most people would kind of intuitively understand that you should play fairly cautiously the whole way through, and you shouldn't be taking risks just to try and build a stack. And a satellite is essentially the same situation because it's the same prizes for the first 12 people or whatever the number of seats is.
So does this type of event, Dara, a satellite, does this favor players who are naturally less, I don't know, expressive or less aggressive in their play generally, less creative maybe? That's pigeonholing people a little bit, but it favors discipline, presumably.
Yeah, it does favor discipline, that's for sure. If your natural game is tight, then yeah. Obviously, like all of these guys like Matt Simbalas that we see on these table here, all these top class guys, they can play any style, and they will play whatever the appropriate style is to the event. When I started playing satellites 15 years ago, it was actually pretty notable that a lot of very good tournament players were absolutely terrible satellite players.
Yeah.
Because they played them the same as they played normal tournaments and too loose and too aggressive. But now I think most people have kind of cottoned on to you just can't do that in a satellite. You can, but you won't be doing very well in satellites. And the converse is sometimes true as well. Like sometimes people who are very good at satellites, just because it suits their natural game, they might not be as good as at normal tournaments then because they're just a little bit too cautious in normal tournaments. You just have to sort of accept that it's a different discipline, and you play a different game. When I'm playing, I have a 3-screen setup, And when I play, I put all the satellites on one screen. I put all the normal vanilla tournaments on another screen, and I put all the PKOs on the third screen. So then, based on what screen I'm looking at, I know whether I'm playing a satellite, a normal tournament, or a PKO. And I play all three very, very differently. Like in the PKOs, I'm just a maniac because I'm chasing bounties and I'm trying to get a stack so that I cover people and can win bounties. In a normal tournament, I'm playing what I would call my normal game, and in a satellite, I'm playing very cautiously. But it's the same person playing all three, and it's the same game, but the optimal strategy is very different depending on whether it's a satellite, a normal tournament, or a PKO. And then obviously normal tournaments change as well. The strategy changes around the bubble.
It's a pretty astonishing picture that you're painting there. Given that a lot of our players, albeit some of them are quite serious, a lot of them are recreational players, amateur players, and so on and so forth. Don't know how many screens generally they'd be working with in terms of tables, but adopting different strategies for the different types of events certainly is quite advanced thinking and showing a hell of a lot of discipline. A bunch of you guys are out there at the moment, so if you've got a question for Dara, please get it in the chat box. It's a really good opportunity to learn a bit more about satellite strategy, mystery bounties, right? We're going to come on and talk about the new book, but mystery bounties, all your poker questions, get them in the chat box for Dara. Frankie Taylor, I should say, was very keen this evening on YouTube, in way before the stream started. When does it start? So hopefully Frankie is out there watching. Now, I would hope so. Tom Clark is there. Triplin is there. Simon Lawler is there. Joe Chilmaid is there. Good evening to all of you guys. Ben is out there. Ben Rosebrook. I won an entry there a couple of nights ago. What, in this, Ben? Just clarify. Did you win a World Series of Poker Seed on GG? Let us know. So Dara, how much of your poker time do you spend on satellites today? Would you be buying into like a 1,000 1 in 12 shot, or are you buying in at $125? Are you buying in at $54? It's efficiency of time, I guess. But what's your general approach to buy-ins and stuff?
My general approach to satellites is I just treat them as tournaments in their own right. I'm not really thinking about like what's my strategy to qualify for tournament X. It's literally just like if a satellite is running for tournament X and I think it's profitable either because it's overlaying or because the field is very soft, then I'm likely to jump into it. Whereas if it's not overlaying and the field looks really tough, then even if I want to play the target tournament, I won't jump in this time. I tend to play, satellites tend to be fairly seasonal. Obviously, the big live events tend to run satellites to them. Yeah. Then when the big festivals are on, you get a lot of satellites as well. So, at the moment Scoop is going on, I played a lot of satellites today for Scoop. But I'm never thinking of like, I want to qualify for this tournament or that tournament. It's simply just, this satellite is a good tournament in its own right. A couple of weeks ago, I did qualify for WSOP main event on GG, but there was no real plan. Like it wasn't like I'm going to grind the 125s to the 250 or whatever. It was simply I was in the middle of my Sunday grind. I looked at the screen where I have all the lobbies, and I saw that particular satellite was going to overlay. I had a quick look at the field. It didn't look too bad, so I thought, okay, well that's definitely a good tournament to jump into. But it was just another tournament on my screen, and people ask me afterwards, like, how did the tournament go? What were the big hands? And to be honest, I just can't remember.
Probably helps if within your head it's not a super important sort of game.
Yeah, you have to treat every table the same and just try and make the best decisions. Like you can't be going, this is the important one, or because then you'll find yourself sweating flips. I do vaguely remember that early on I was all in, which obviously is, if you're coming into the last minute, is going to be fair. And I look back and I still had chips. So I don't know what happened. Days. I don't know whether it was a flip. I don't know whether I dogged some guy. I don't know whether I got it against a better hand in hell. But I just knew I had chips. And then I remember getting it in again just before the final table. And again, looking back and seeing I still had chips. And then the only other 2 points I remember in the tournament were right on the bubble. I remember the small blind shoved into me, and I had a fairly close decision. So I had to do some mental maths, and I decided it was a fold. And then 1 orbit later, the exact same situation, small blind shoved, had to do some mental maths. This time I decided it was a call, and I called and won. And that was the end of the satellite. But like I couldn't even tell you what the hands were, because that wasn't the important information for me. The important information was like stack sizes, working out my chance of cashing if I folded, working out my chance of cashing if I called. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to do a review of that for As Jack's training site, which I do a webinar once a month for. But it'll be as much as a surprise to me as everybody else what the actual hands were.
How you played?
But was it right in saying, I did read, I think there's an article up about it. It was about 20 something odd minutes.
21 minutes. Yeah, I didn't even
from when you registered to when you won it.
Yeah. Again, I didn't even realize that. I just posted the picture on Twitter to show that I won a seat, and one of the things GG does is it tells you how long you were in the tournament, and somebody else actually noticed it. And then there was a lot of 21 minutes basically. So I probably only played. I think I only played 4 hands in the entire tournament, 2 of which were shoves and 1 of which was a call off. But there was I probably only witnessed 25 hands in the entire tournament.
But of course, that's the point with the way GG structure their satellites. The minute that late reg closes, if you max late regged it, then the clock gets halved anyway. So it goes from a 10-minute to a 5-minute clock. So it does get pretty turbo-ish. I mean, we're on the hand for hand at the moment now on this one. There's 14 players remaining. So
let's watch this.
12 are getting packages. Average stack now is 8.5 bigs. Chip leader's got 18 bigs. We've got a couple here on 1.3, 2.3, 4.4. I mean, you're just not calling with anything here until you really have to. I'm assuming. Yeah,
it become like around satellite bubbles. By far, the most important thing is your stack relative to the other stacks. That's much more important than your hand or your position. There can be situations where you have to fold aces because of your stack, and there could be other situations where you have to shove 7 deuce on the button because of the way the stacks are distributed. And that's where most of the skill in satellites comes from, sort of recognizing that. If you stick to, in inverted commas, normal ranges, you'll just get murdered in satellites. You make huge equity errors.
What do you make here of the Bonds 72 is the chip leader who's just open shoved with 10-6, has got called by Love Betting, who only had a blind and a bit with jacks. Yeah. So I mean, as a chip leader here with sort of 17 bigs, are you just going, well, I'm locked up, I don't want to really get involved here, let's let a couple of the other short stacks sort it out between themselves? Because all of a sudden you then go from, as the levels go up again, so it's now gone from 17 bigs down to 10. Obviously everybody else has dropped as well, but still psychologically it must affect the way you think how you play the game.
Yeah, I personally would just let those spots go, because the other thing is that when you fold as the chip leader, it's much more likely then the 2 of the shorter stacks will get it in, and that'll actually speed things up. Often the chip leader thinks, oh well, I want this over quick, so I'm just going to shove every hand. But it can be a better strategy to just let the short stacks tangle. There are some like really interesting spots in satellites. One which I don't think we included in the book, but I think I included in my masterclass, was that if you're in a satellite with 3 people left and there are 2 seats, so it's the exact bubble, and you have 50 big blinds on the button, and the other 2 guys only have 5 big blinds, the correct play is just to fold 100% of the button. Even if you have aces, you're supposed to fold. Because the likelihood is then that the other 2 5 big blind stacks will get it in against each other, and that'll end the satellite then, and you'll win. So even though it's profitable to shove aces in that spot, it's actually more profitable to fold aces, which is weird. The first time I noticed that, a student actually had ran the spot in Hold'em Resources Calculator and got this result and said this has to be a bug. There's no way it can be correct to fold aces in the spot where you're a massive chip leader. But it actually is, because when you drill down on the math, what you find is that if you shove aces, on average, your chances of winning a seat go from 96% up to 97.2%. But if you fold the aces, the other two guys will get it in more than half the time, and that'll end the satellite unless there's a chop pot. So actually, your chances of winning a seat if you fold are going from 96% up to more than 98%. So yeah, like satellites create all these really weird scenarios, but then it's a completely different scenario if it's four seats left, and the other three guys are all short. Then you're supposed to be just open shoving everything.
How about management of the clock, Dara? So lots of players here using their time bank and what have you. How important is that in your strategy?
Yeah, they can like essentially. I described the end of a satellite as a sort of a slow bicycle race. Another comparison you can make is it's kind of musical chairs, where somebody is going to have to be forced all in first, the short, and it's not necessarily the shortest stack in the tournament, because it's the shortest stack in the tournament, but he's on the button or in late position, and there are some other very short stacks before them who are going to be forced into the blinds. You know, sometimes people panic in that spot, going, "Oh, I need 1.5 big blinds, and I'm on the button, so I have to shove now." But if you look at the other tables, you'll see that there are 2 or 3 other guys who are actually going to be forced all in before you, particularly if the blinds go up. So sometimes you'll see people stalling to try and force the blinds up before they hit other people, and therefore force them all in. You know, people say, people kind of know that before hand for hand you should be stalling. That's to your advantage, but often people say, well, why would you bother stalling on the bubble? Because it's hand for hand. But the reason generally is that you're trying to force the blinds up. So that other short stacks, either on your table or another table, will have to pay the higher blinds when they hit them and be forced all in before you are. And when satellites are played properly, that's generally what the bubbles come down to. A bunch of short stacks eyeing each other up, trying to work out who's going to be forced all in first. And sometimes people will make a mistake and they'll go prematurely. Like if I find myself in a situation where I'm the shortest and I'm going to blind out first, what I'm going to look at is who the other short stacks are. And if they're Matas Simbalas and Sylvan Loosely and Tom Hall, Stevie Chidwick, all really good satellite players, I know, okay, well, they're all going to wait. They're going to wait for me to make my move. So I do need to make a move. But if it's all, if it's 4 guys who've, when I shark scope them, or I've never seen them before, and I have a suspicion that they're not top class satellite players and they might just panic and go all in before they have to, then I'm much more likely to just sit and wait and hope that they make a mistake. And that's why, sometimes people say, well, how did you get down to an ante, or how did you get down to 1 big blind? And that's the reason. You think other people are going to make a mistake and shove prematurely.
Well, I think that sums it up, Dara, isn't it? It's actually a lot of the time it's sat there waiting to see, let others make the mistakes. And if you can make fewer mistakes than anybody else in a satellite, and you need a bit of luck. I mean, Matas had it there earlier on. He shoved with the Queen 10 and got looked up by Ace King, and he managed to get there. You do need a little bit of luck as you're going, don't you? It's
you do for sure. Like there's a lot of times where you are going to have to be all in with a fairly marginal hand. You're also much better. It's even when you're short, it's important to recognize that like not every spot is the same. There are some times where if you're short and you're going to have to find a shove, you're better shoving from say middle position than the button, because often if you shove the button and the 2 stacks behind cover you very comfortably, you're always getting called because you're not going to be able to hurt them. But let's say you shove from early position and it's the chip leader's big blind. Well, nobody between you and him is going to want to get involved, because they're going to be afraid that the chip leader wakes up with a hand, or if they call, the chip leader just shoves and now they have to fold. So that's actually a better spot to move all in. And if you have an above average hand, because even if the chip leader is always going to call you, well, if he's going to always call you, then you're up against a random hand. So shoving an above average hand is actually a plus EV spot because nobody else will call behind. But if you're in a spot where you're on the button and there are two fairly comfortable medium stacks who can call without causing themselves any great damage, then that's not such a good shove spot. And your hand actually matters a lot less than how likely it is that you're going to at least be only up against one player. Like if you're shoving into the big blind, the chip leader's big blind, so you think what's going to happen most of the time is he's going to call and everybody else will fold. Well, then shoving any above average hand is a good spot for you.
Yeah.
If on the other hand you're on the button and you only have 3 big blinds and the two guys in the blinds have 30 big blinds each, and you think if you shove they're both going to call and check it down, now shoving even a decent hand like ace 8 might not be that good, because ace 8 3-way against 2 random hands is going to lose more than half the time.
Why don't
whereas
we...
you're better waiting for that spot, that other spot where you're actually going to win more than half the time if you have an above average hand against the chip leader's call off range.
Why don't we see checking down a lot more on the bubble in satellite strategy, Dara? So early position goes in, he's the short stack, he's got 1 or 2 blinds, there's a call after him, you're on the button or whatever. Do you want to get involved just to try and end up in a position whereby it's 2 or 3 of you against the short stack?
Yeah, like almost everything else in satellites, it depends completely on your stack. Like if you can call, and even if you lose or you're forced to fold pre-flop because somebody shoves behind and it's not going to seriously damage your prospects, then if you have any decent hand, particularly a hand that plays well multi-way, like an 8-7 suited or a king 10 suited, any hand like that, then you probably do want to get involved.
Dara, I've got to ask you, what does Matsui do here? Bond's 72 chip leader's gone all in. Matsui's got 0.3 of a big blind left in the big blind. Sewell, who's 1 to his left, has got 1.1 big blind. So very next hand, Sewell's going to be all in, as is Matsui.
He's going to be all in as well. I think he has to call. I think he pretty much has to call off here. We can't see the other table, so unless there's somebody else.
There's sat. No, it's hand for hand. There's sat. He's got ace 6, but he's behind. This is the bubble. This could be it. He needs an ace, a 5, or a 6. There's that peel we all love. Oh, it's a 6.
The saddest player is Sewell now. He can't believe what's just happened.
But he may obviously. I mean, he had ace 6. So to be honest, he was time banking it down to make sure that Sewell's definitely going to be all in next hand. And obviously, Matsu's now got the ability to fold out of this small blind. Bonds has gone all in. Just actually 1 big, which is enough to basically match Sewell here. So Matsui, you would imagine, will fold this in the small blind.
He doesn't want to get involved here because he doesn't want to lose that half a big blind, because actually every other player is now shorter than him. He's actually the second biggest stack on the table, and he wants to maintain that situation. So there's absolutely no reason to get involved here.
But they're playing at 3.7 bigs as the average stack here now, with 1 to go. This is just nuts
for a 12 grand package.
Yeah, one of them is going to miss out, unfortunately.
He's got involved.
He has called here. And
he's got involved.
This is a bit risky for him now, because if the other guys somehow survive and it comes back to him, he's going to be all in next round of blinds. There's also no guarantee the chip leader is going to do something silly and just bet.
Well, Bonds has made some pretty hefty bets here in these,
but it does look like
stages.
It does look like he's just trying to end the satellite now.
This is where Sewell wants to wake up with six deuce or something. Yeah, he's got a 9, and it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good.
Yeah.
This is where you just need to run pretty darn well, don't you?
Yeah.
The Sewell is now going to effectively can afford to fold this small.
Sewell can afford, because there are
love for betting is now the next one in the firing line here, isn't it?
This is exactly what I was saying. Like, it's essentially like musical chairs now, and now it's on love for betting. He's the one that the others can wait for. again, we don't know what's happening on the other table, so it's possible.
On the other table, there's a 1.4 bigs and a 2 bigs, 1.1 coming round to the blind. I'll just quickly bring up the table whilst we're there. So they're short on that one as well, very much. There's nobody with
no, not my knees is going to be all in 2 hands. So bad news for the guy on the other table, because he's all in next hand.
Yeah, so I'm assuming Sul will just fold this this small blind here.
Given the significance of the prize here, Dara, I mean, are you slightly reducing the number of tables that you're playing so that you can actually keep an eye on the other tables, or do you find that actually you can add another 1 or 2 tables?
Yeah, once you get to a satellite bubble like this, I'm definitely not regging any tournaments that I was planning to reg, and I am giving this one most of my focus.
Yes.
So what I'll often do is I'll blow this up, the important one up on one screen.
Okay, Dara, question for you.
Yeah.
So Love for Betting has got 0.1 of a big blind behind. So could fold this and will be all in next hand. Not My Knees on the other table has got 1 big blind as well, and he's going to be all in the next hand as well.
It depends on his hand here.
You're playing that. We're talking about absolute finest of margins here, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, this is the thing. He has to work out what gives him the best chance. If he folds this hand, he's going to have to win the next hand. But if he does, he'll have a few more hands where he can survive then. So if he has a really bad hand here, he can definitely just fold and give himself a better shot on the next hand.
Because he only maybe needs to win the next hand. Doesn't need to get a lot of chips from it.
No, this is the thing. Yeah, he just needs to survive. Because even on his table, you can see that there are guys who
and he's done exactly that. He's folded that and left himself with 0.1 of big ones on the other table. So 4 times bet, who I've seen playing quite a lot of satellites today on GG. I think plays quite a bit. Mattis there. So it's now going to be
absolutely no reason.
No, Not My Knees now. Yeah. So No, Not My Knees is now all in. Love for Betting is all in. It's now going to be on who's going to Now, interesting system failure here on this table has just called the 1 big blind. So they're going to get a few of them that might just surely.
Yeah, he's got a stack where he can
do this. Mattis is going to do this surely from the small.
I think the big blind is too important. The 1 big blind is too important for the others. They should probably just fold. Mattis can call. It's only half a big blind to Mattis, so he can definitely call.
Makes the call.
And they're busy time banking. Right? They're time banking on the other table at the moment. So we're still with the guy who's under the gun, who is time banking. So you're not missing anything on the other table a minute. Of course, if Not My Knees wins this hand, then and Jack might be good. Oh, there's a king there. So Not My Knees is going to be out. But Not My Knees started this hand with more chips than Love for Betting. So over to the other table.
All right, so he has to survive.
So if Love for Betting doesn't win this hand, Not My Knees, Not My Knees is going to get a package here, even though he's just lost that hand.
That's a 6 worth.
Jesus Christ.
And it surely Bonds is just going to flat call this. Yeah, so
got to.
Yeah, he should do. Yeah, this should get checked down as well.
Love for Betting. So basically, if Love for Betting wins this hand, gets the package. Doesn't, it goes to No, Not My Knees. Wow.
No pressure.
And he was sat there with 0.1 of a big blind. And
could be chops now. If they all have the same high card.
Queen could take this.
The board could play.
Wow, they could actually pin the board now.
The board could play.
Board.
It's the board.
7-4. He's won a package with 7-4.
He's won a package, chopping it 3 ways with 7-4 with 0.1 of a big blind.
That is sick.
Did we ever like to see an ace as much as that on the river?
Oh,
very
goodness
nice.
me. Yeah, because anything other than that and a kicker would have played. Yeah. So Wow. And that's the superstar on GG again, folks. I mean, it's nothing for even if you're not playing it, watching it, it's entertaining to watch for sort of the last half hour or so of the tournament.
It's super sick entertainmentally.
It really, really is.
Listen,
yeah, I love watching the end of satellites because they're so different from the end of from anything else in poker. Like the hands really don't matter. It's just like who's going to be forced in first, what's their best spot. You know, we saw that there, but the guy who folded the big blind last hand because
love for betting, yeah,
because he reckoned that he must have had some terrible hand, and he reckoned that he had a better chance of surviving the next hand than that one.
That was incredible stuff. Dara, we've got a few questions, right? So, guys, thank you for your patience. We wanted to see that play out, but there are a few questions here. So let me pitch these over to you one at a time, Dara. So Ben just confirms, he won an entry on GG a couple of nights ago. So top bombing. Ben, nice job. Good luck.
I'm assuming that's for APAT. Well, I don't know whether it's Vegas or APAT. I'm not sure which one. Did he say which?
I'd assumed we were talking Vegas, but...
Oh, it could easily be APAT, Des. Could
Okay,
easily be. I mean, that's quite a prestigious thing to win an APAT ticket, honestly. So.
Thursday night on Club GG.
There we go. So it's one of the Vegas ones. Yeah. So,
one of the Vegas
cool.
ones. Well done, sir. So Simon asks, Dara, have you been a big stack close to the end of Satellite? Did you open most hands or clam up?
It depends. It very much depends on what the other players are doing. Like 10 years ago when I played Satellites, my typical Irish Open Satellite experience, let's say, was you get to the final table, 9 players left, there'd be 4 seats. I was usually 8 of 9 or 9 of 9 because I had been playing fairly cautiously. And then my strategy was brutally simple. Every time it was folded around to me, I would open for a min raise. And that strategy on its own was generally good enough to win a seat almost always. And usually actually when the seats went out, I was chip leader because people played so cautiously back then. But better players kind of figured out that what I was doing was basically just min raising, trying to take down the blinds. And if I was meeting any opposition, I was going to have to fold. So there was a period where I was doing that on stars in UK IPT Satellites, and guys like Jabrakada were just shoving on me every time, and I was having to fold. So I had to completely change my strategy and switch actually to a shove or fold strategy myself. I couldn't open any more near bubbles. I had to just decide if my hand was strong enough to put all the chips in, and if it wasn't strong enough to just fold, because somebody would always shove on you if you opened. So it really depends. These days, you still see both types of satellites. You see satellites where everybody's playing super tight, and when you open, at least 3/4 of the time, everybody's folding. So it's just super profitable to min raise every hand. But then you see other satellites where you just don't get away with that. Every time you min raise, you get shoved on. So you have to switch to plan B, which is all in or fold.
So no obvious answer there, Simon. You've got to be agile, right? You've got to be unpredictable. Tom Clark wants to know, Dara, what's the strategy adjustments for hybrid satellites? So they pay out seats, but there's also a separate prize pool.
Yeah, it depends on how big your stack is. If your stack is very short, then you're essentially playing it like a normal satellite, because winning the seat is the most important thing. If your stack is very big and you're locked up for a seat, you're playing it closer to a normal tournament because you're incentivized to compete for a bigger portion of the other pool. If you're in the middle, it's difficult. It's a balancing act. You have to decide. You have to try and work out how much of your equity is in locking up a seat compared to how much you can gain from competing for the rest of the pool. So yeah, there's no easy answer when you're a medium stack. There is a simple answer when you're a short stack, which is just treated like a normal satellite, or when you're a big stack, which is just treated like a normal tournament.
Yeah.
But when you're middle stack, it's a balancing act.
Dara, you've obviously won seats as we know into the main event this year through satellite. Do you continue to play World Series of Poker satellites to try and repeat win seats? Is that a profitable strategy for you?
Yeah, the calculation changes slightly because of the way the GG policy of that. Expenses. If you win a second seat, they give you tournament dollars but minus the reg fee. So
yes.
So you're not playing. You know, your first prize is lower, let's say, on the second ones. So you have to decide. Essentially, it's like an extra, whatever it works out, at 12.5% in rake. So if you think it's still if I think it's still profitable, I will. But if I think because of that additional factor, it's not profitable anymore, then I won't. So there would be some satellites where I would play them if it was my first, if I hadn't already qualified, because I'm playing for the full 12K package then. But I wouldn't play if it was my second, because in that scenario I'm only getting 10.5K.
Yeah, it makes sense.
On GG, there's some ridiculously good value in the $1,200 satellites. I mean, the one we're watching at the moment, it's in level 5 at the moment. Those 3 players you can see on the table are the only 3 registered, and there are 2 packages guaranteed.
No.
So it's got 60 minutes of late reg on it. It's currently got the 3 that were required to get the thing going, but they've currently got, it's a 20,500 overlay on this at the moment. Now, the way GG's policy works is, if this got down to 1 player before late reg closes, they'll wait for 10 minutes. If nobody else joins, they'll pay out just the prize pool that was collected. If it gets through late reg, so if it gets through 60 minutes, have you got mates on speed dial ready to get them to jump into a satellite, to keep a satellite going if it's good value, Dara? I mean, is there a strategy to that?
I mean, I should really, but I'm not organized enough to do that. But yeah, it would definitely be probable for a couple of guys to look at satellites and say, okay, if we reg this and it gets to at the end of late reg, there's likely to be an overlay. But you never really know, because once the satellite gets going again and other people see there's an overlay, then maybe they'll jump in and that'll remove the overlay. So it's hard to know. A friend of mine actually joined one of the 125 sats during the week to a 1250. Exactly the scenario that you're describing had happened. Only 4 players had started it, and one guy had knocked out the other 3. So he was sitting there on his own, and then just as reg was going to close, my friend jumped in. So now he's heads up against this guy. And he actually ends up winning heads up. But because late reg still hasn't closed, he didn't actually win entry to the 1250 satellite. He just won 5 buy-ins, whatever that was. $500, I guess. So yeah, there are certainly exploits you can do. I remember years ago, there was a satellite, I think maybe for the Irish Open on Party Poker, and there were 2 seats, and there was only 5 people left as registration was closing. But one guy had well over half the chips. So I max late regged it, and my starting stack put me second of 6 because everybody else was below starting stack. So you sometimes get those incredible exploits too. Like, I was obviously better. I mean, obviously the chip leader had a seat locked up, but the other 5 of us were competing for a seat. But I had more chips than the other 5, so I was probably like 25 or 30%. Whereas if I'd regged that at the start, I was only 10%. So you do sometimes get these really profitable max late reg spots because of that.
It is quite funny watching some of these because you watch them. You can see they're desperate not to actually knock each other out until it can get through the late reg period. Because there's value in it. So they don't mind if actually a few people. Oh, and you'll always get it. You'll always get as you get towards the late reg time, all of a sudden people, and it's often the usual faces. I guess if you've played a few of these, you know the players that are regularly playing these bigger satellites. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they really shouldn't be knocking each other out, because they really should just try and get to the end of late reg. So, I don't know how GG would feel about them both. That everybody just clicking the sit out button and letting the blind cycle around. That might qualify as collusion. I'm not sure, but that's essentially what they should be doing from a purely game theory point of view. That's clearly the most profitable thing. Just make sure the tournament gets to the end of late registration, and then you're playing for a seat.
Dara, a question from Tristan. So what ratio to buy-in should we use to play satellites? So a 1K buy-in, Tristan is saying, I normally use £150 to try and satellite into that event. Is that the sort of right ratio? Is there a ratio that you look to stick to?
Yeah, I think this is this is a situation where the answer is completely different, whether you're a professional or you're a recreational player. If you're a professional, like I said earlier, I just think of each satellite as, is this profitable in its own right? And then all of the considerations go out the window. I don't think in terms of ratios or anything like that. It's just like, if I registered this satellite tournament, and I played it 100,000 times, would it be profitable for me in the long run? But when you're a recreational player, there is, I guess, there's comfort levels. Like, I saw this for the Irish Open. There were people saying, like, how much should I devote to satellites? And there's definitely one big inflection point is people don't like spending more on satellites than it would have cost them to just buy into the tournament. Which, if you run really badly in satellites, that can happen. So I think the answer to the question is there's no general answer. You just have to ask yourself, like, what feels right for me? What's the number that I'm happy with? And what's the number I would be unhappy with? I'd be unhappy spending 1,000, 1,500 to try and qualify for a 1,000 tournament. Even if I qualified for it, I'd feel like I should have just bought in. So yeah, just to ask yourself, like, what's the thing? I mean, the bigger the number is, obviously, the better chance you have of actually satelliting in. Like, if you're going to devote 150 to try and qualify for a 1K, and let's say you're average, or even if let's say you're above average, so you have a bit of an edge. You're still only giving yourself roughly a 20% chance of qualifying. So there is a kind of a trade-off between how much you want to play the target tournament versus how much you feel comfortable with losing. I guess it's kind of the same situation. Recreational players should always be asking themselves, is like, what's a comfortable amount to lose? And just don't risk more than that.
Yeah, it makes sense. If you had the ability to get staking, would you choose that route over playing satellites? Now, granted, you might use your staking to enter satellites, but would that be...
It's an interesting question. Like, I've never been staked at any point in my career, because if you're a profitable player, unless you're selling, being staked is different from selling at markup. But if you're just being staked, then if you're a profitable player, essentially all you're doing is you're giving up a percentage of your profit in return for being staked. And if you're able to stake yourself, there's no real upside to that, which is why I've never been staked in my career. But if somebody offered, I guess the more interesting question would be if somebody like offered me a one-off, like they said, okay, I'll put you into the next EPT and I'll give you whatever percentage of yourself as a free roll. Yeah. Would I take that rather than play satellites? I might do it. It would probably depend on the percentage. It would be a calculation. How much do I think I'll make in the satellites compared to how much will this free roll make for me?
I guess where I was sort of going with that is that if, for example, you think entering a satellite gives you a 20% chance of taking a seat, would you be better giving away 80% of yourself to get to the target tournament? No, you're right. That's a really good strategy. Like, if you really want to play the target tournament,
guaranteed, right? Then you would often be, and you can sell. Then you probably sell to friends or whatever. Then you probably are better off just selling whatever percentage you need to make it comfortable for you. And that way you definitely get to play the target tournament.
Yeah, I think maybe that leads into the next question, albeit it's not at all posed in this way, but it might be that you have novelty backers, right? Friends, family, you're going to something special and they all want to get involved in a small way. So Barry Cullen is out there with a beautiful question. Any tips for first-time World Series of Poker players? So, for any player going to their first World Series, it's not unusual for lots of people to want to buy a little piece of them.
Yeah, I actually wrote a piece on this for Vegas Slots Online.
I was about to say, Dara, I was going to say, my tip is read Dara's article about going to Vegas, because he's updated it from the one, because it was obviously you'd written it a few years back. It's bloody good.
The one thing I would say is that if you're coming over from this side of the pond to over there, like, American recreationals play a lot different from European recreationals. So just kind of be aware of that. Like, you're going to have to change your game somewhat, based on the way that the American recreations typically play, which is quite different from the way people over here play. So if I have to give people one tip, it's before you play your first WSOP event, play some lower buy-in events, daily deep stacks or whatever, just to sort of get your eye in for the way that people play over in the States. That's probably better than going in cold and suddenly finding, oh my God, these players are all doing stuff that's completely different from what I'm used to in your first, 1K or 1500 WSOP event. Although there are very low buy-in WSOP events now, as low as 300. So yeah, but definitely play something small at the start just to sort of get a feel for the way the game plays over there.
Yeah, it makes good sense. Tell me, Dara, A, does it still excite you, the World Series of Poker? And B, what type of schedule would you maybe expect to play this summer?
I mean, these days I usually just look at when the seniors is on and get there just before that.
Is there value? Is there value in the seniors?
There is value in the seniors, although not as much as there was. Seniors are getting better, like everybody else as well. And in fact, I would say that probably the average senior American is better than the average 25-year-old American. For the simple reason that they've at least been playing for 30, 40 years, and they maybe even played online back in the day, whereas the average 25-year-old came of age after Black Friday, probably hasn't played online at all or very little, and just generally doesn't have much experience. So that's one thing which has definitely changed in recent years. Seniors have gotten a bit more difficult. It used to be the case that, like, when you went over to America, you wanted to see old Americans at your table, and they were the value. But now often it's actually the young Americans are more the value. But going back to the question, so I'm flying over the 20th this year. The senior starts on the 21st, and then I'm staying till the end. And that's something which has changed as well. It used to be the case that you had to try and work out what day you were going to leave in relation to how optimistic or pessimistic you were feeling about the main event, because the main event was literally the last event. So once you bust that, it was like massive anticlimax. Yeah. Just get me out of here as quickly as possible. There's nothing else to do. But the WSOP have sensibly realized that now, and they've started scheduling other events to start after the main event. So you can actually just commit now to being there till the end of the main event, knowing that if you do happen to bust on day 2 or day 3 or day 4 or whatever, at least there'll be other stuff for you to play. And actually those tournaments are often great value, because if you can keep your head together after busting the main event and play anything close to your best game, you'll often be playing against a lot of very tilted professionals who are very unhappy and miserable about the fact that they're not in the main event anymore. And yeah, my best results in recent years in Vegas have actually come in those tournaments after the main event.
Oh, fantastic!
No, I can confirm that's a good. The structure, so the schedule after the main event's got some really cool stuff on. We were out there last year, in July, and we're going out again this year. I'm out on the 26th, so about a week after you, Dara, and staying out again till well into July. So don't think I'll be playing the main, but certainly looking forward to playing some of those other events at the series.
Do you take any downtime when you're out there, Dara, or do you see that as just peak, financial opportunity during the year, lots of tournaments, big prize pools, absolutely no time to be out fishing, as it were?
Yeah, I've kind of done both. Like, anytime I go for the full series, which I haven't done in several years now, I definitely take a midterm break.
Yeah.
What I used to do was I used to take a few days in the middle, fly to New York to meet my wife, spend a few days in New York with her, and then she'd come back to Vegas for the second half of the series. And it kind of gave me a sort of a refresher, like it was a start again, because you can feel beaten up very quickly if you go over there and you just break everything for a couple of weeks. By the time the main event rolls around, you can be fairly over it. So having that sort of mental refresher was good. But my wife really doesn't like Vegas, so couple of years ago, she said, "Okay, I'm not coming anymore." And I have, as I said, in recent years, I've tended to just go for the seniors, which usually is about halfway through the series and stay till the end. So when it's only 3 weeks, I don't really feel the need for a break.
Yeah.
It's kind of just like 3 weeks head down. You know it's going to be over after 3 weeks, so it's fine. Sometimes I will take a day off if I'm feeling tired or psychologically deflated during the trip. The best things tend to be always on at the weekends anyway. So often there's not too much that's really great to play, say, on an average Wednesday. So a lot of professionals will take 1 day a week off, typically Wednesday or Thursday. But the weekends are when, all of the recreational players come into town and all of the bigger events are on. So, that tends to be the schedule.
Dara, the mental game of poker, right? And your good mate and co-author Barry Karch, of course, wrote about the mental game of poker going back some years now. But that must be super important. It must be just much more visibly important today than perhaps it was recognized maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. Do you find yourself mentally strong? Are you super robust? Or, can any player have that, Christ, I've had 6 or 7 tourneys where, I've lost all the flips and everything's going against me. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think I'm naturally blessed with sort of like a reasonably strong mental game. I also think it actually helps to be something of a pessimist, because I think if you're too optimistic and you go over thinking, oh, everything's going to be brilliant and it's going to be amazing, and then you go over and you break your first 20 tournaments or whatever, it kind of grates you. It can wear you down. Whereas if you just kind of go over and you have a not necessarily pessimistic but more realistic attitude of saying, look, I could very well break my first 20 tournaments, and if I do, I'm just going to have to be able to cope with that. And then you're better able to do it. I wrote a blog about this once called the Stockdale Paradox. It's actually a fairly well-known psychological phenomenon. There was a guy called John Stockdale. He was a prisoner of war in the Korea with the disappointments that came. I kind of think it's the same in poker. Like when I'm preparing guys, I sometimes have students who make a big final table online or live, and we do preparation before the final table, and I never tell them like visualize winning the tournament or visualize everything going great, because I don't see the point of that. Like if everything goes great, there's nothing to deal with. They're not going to have any problems. I think it was Quincy Jones said once, or maybe it was Ray Charles said, like, worry about the valleys, don't worry about the hills, because the hills will take care of themselves. It's the down periods that you have to worry about. So I always get guys to imagine all the scenarios. Imagine you lose half your stack on the first hand of the final table. How are you going to deal with that? How's that going to feel? How are you going to be able to mentally adjust to the fact that you now have a shorter stack? Imagine you're card dead for the first 2 hours and you're sitting there folding. Are you going to have the discipline to keep folding? And I think it's kind of the same when you're going into a series. You just have to imagine everything that could possibly go wrong, and ask yourself, like, will I be able to cope with this? Will I be able to cope with all of these things? If I break my first 20 tournaments, if anything else you can imagine go wrong, if I get a cold and I don't feel very good, or basically just prepare yourself mentally for anything that could possibly.
Because Dara, Vegas can actually weirdly be quite a lonely place at times. I remember, I was quite late kind of going out to Vegas. First time I went out was about 8 years ago. And I remember the Rio playing my first ever WSOP event and busting reasonably early and sat out on the corridor, nobody around. And all you could hear was the riffling of chips from around me. And you sat there and it's quite like you have to take a moment to go, okay, it's just a game, it doesn't really matter. But at that moment in time, I was, of course, there's nothing to jump back in and play, and everyone else was playing, and so it's you've got to know how to deal with it.
Yeah, you're right. No, it is. It can be a brutally lonely place, and as I've gotten more experienced in Vegas, and kind of realized that that's a lot of players' experience, I do make a conscious effort if I think somebody, on their first or second Vegas and they're having a hard time of it and it's just not going well for them, just checking in on them, make sure they're okay, because it can be it can be absolutely demoralizing. I've seen very promising poker careers essentially destroyed by Vegas. Guys go over there, they're doing well online or live back home, and they think everything's going to be great, and then they go over and they have a terrible Vegas, and it just completely destroys their morale and their love for the game. So you kind of there's definitely a downside to that, and you have to be sort of, you think, oh well, everybody's in Vegas and all your friends are going to be there, but like it's actually very hard to socialize in Vegas as well, because if you try to organize to meet 3 or 4 friends, there's a good chance at least one of them will be involved in a tournament at that time. Like myself and David have stopped trying. We used to think, oh, we're over in Vegas, we'll get lots of interviews and it'll be great, but it never works out, because we never, we try and, let's say somebody agrees to give us an interview and we say, okay, we'll do it on Thursday at 4, and then Thursday at 4 either one of us is playing or the guy we want to interview is playing. So generally your friends will be occupied a lot of the time when you want to socialize yourself, and you kind of have to be prepared for that as well. And there's another thing in Vegas too, which is like, no matter what you're doing, it always feels like there's something else you could be doing. This is the thing I've felt a few times. Like you go out to socialize with people, but there's a tournament and you think maybe I should be playing that tournament, or you're in the tournament and you're thinking there's this other tournament about to start. Maybe that's a better tournament. Vegas, and the other thing about Vegas is when you're there, it's like the rest of the world doesn't exist. Like you don't hear any news about any world affairs. It just seems to be your entire world. So it can be a little bit overwhelming, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
No, it is very much a Vegas bubble, isn't it? And you forget that actually everything else is going on in the world, but at that moment in time it is that, and often it can be right, that tournament's for, okay, what's the next tournament I can play, and where am I going to go next? What am I going to do? It's
you're talking, it's a really interesting topic, right? Loneliness in a city like Vegas, and with all of the other stuff going on around, money you're putting on the table and stuff like that. It's obvious, Dara, you've got a very close relationship with David, right? You guys have been mates for ages. You do a lot of traveling together on the circuit. Of course, you have your shows and podcasts and stuff like that. You seem to be an incredibly tight sort of support network for each other, really. How important is that, particularly if your wife's not going over now, how important is it for a player just to have somebody you can rely on? You can actually, just rely on over there.
Yeah, no, it's very important, particularly the person that you're staying with. Like if you're rooming with somebody and, if you don't know them that well, trust me, you'll get to know them very well over 3 weeks in Vegas. And anything about them that annoys you or anything about you that annoys them will come into very sharp focus at some point. So, the thing about myself and David, we obviously know that we can tolerate each other's company now.
Yeah.
Even though David's a miserable bastard when things are not going well for him.
I was gonna say, Des, let me reach up to grab.
What have you got?
Arrived. Oh, what have you got? This arrived today.
No.
Look at this. This is a proper old school book. None of your ebook nonsense. But I was thumbing through this earlier on, and it's got at the end you've got the about the authors, and you've got acknowledgements, and so page 247 at the bottom, and it just says neither of us are going to thank David Lappin this time. So they've had a falling out. Clearly,
I can't believe that.
Can you believe, though? I've had a quick look through this, Des. All this, so you say 200 odd plus pages about mystery bounty poker strategy. Not a single suggestion on how you should open the envelope. Yeah. No mention. Do you do the slow tease? Do you just do the rip? Doesn't even cover. I mean, Lappin could have covered that off for you. It wouldn't have been a problem.
Yeah. It's we were surprised how big the book ended up being. This started as me and Barry going like, we could do this really quickly, just put down the most important stuff about mystery bounties, and it probably won't be very big. We'll put it out as an ebook. We'll charge a $5 for it, and that'll be it. And then as we got into it, we were like, well, what about this situation? What about like if if the big mystery bounty has just been gone, how much does that change things? Or what about if we're down to the final table bubble and the big mystery bounty is still there? How much does that change things? So we ended up actually putting way more into the book than we expected. But one thing we overlooked was envelope opening strategy. Although personally, I'm not a fan of the envelopes. I much prefer the tombola.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Step to the box. Absolutely.
But of course, I guess it wasn't that long ago, and this book wouldn't have even existed because there wouldn't have even been such a thing as mystery bounties. I mean, they've really come to the forefront. I suppose, as I think you've mentioned in other articles you've written about, a kind of a live version of the popular kind of progressive knockout online, which is very difficult to do in a live environment. So it's a twist that seems to work.
Yeah, absolutely. People love knockout tournaments because they add an extra dimension, and they're also just very good for the game overall because they encourage people. A lot of the problems with satellites is that it encourages people to play a very tight, boring style. That is actually correct in a satellite. It encourages people to play slowly, to tank near the bubble, because that's making you money if you do that. But knockout tournaments kind of eradicate all of those problems. The correct way to play a knockout tournament is like a maniac. Make sure that you cover people so that you can win bounties, and then to chase those bounties. So it's a much more fun style of poker than a traditional tournament. And there's absolutely no reason why anybody would ever be stalling or doing any of these things. The other thing that annoy players as well. So because of that, they're a much more fun format. But also, they're not perfectly solved. So it's not completely clear what the correct strategies in lots of spots, and that's also good for the game, knowing that like everybody's essentially just making their best guess and thinking on the fly. So like PKOs have just taken over online. They're you go onto Stars or GG, at least half the tournaments are PKOs these days because they're such a popular format. But as you said, they're very hard to do live. A few people have managed them, but it is difficult, and you also have to police that people aren't pocketing chips and all the rest of it. So the mystery bounty is just an ingenious way of bringing bounties to live. But the fact that then the bounties can be so big, in the WSOP last year we had the one where they guaranteed that the big bounty would be 1 million for a 1K buy-in, and that creates a huge buzz. And
of course that can be, you can just bust a player, they're normally paid out once you hit the money, isn't it? So it could be that it's the first player that you bust, and you happen to pick the right envelope, and you've won 1 million, and then you could bust the tournament yourself then, in the next hour or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Matt Glantz won it last year, and he ended up getting more than the winner as a result, because he picked the right envelope. One of the funnier things for us when we were talking about mystery bounties and people were asking us about them is that a lot of people are convinced that there's some strategy to when you pull that, and even some very smart people had arguments. You'd hear people saying, "Well, you should absolutely go at the start because you can still win you can always win the big one then." Whereas, if you wait, somebody else might pull it in the meantime, and then you have no chance of winning the big one. And while that is true, it doesn't mean you have a better chance of winning the big prize.
Are these the same guys that have got those roulette strategies?
It's bizarre, but like it's actually, there are some very good poker players, and I'm not going to name and shame them, but there are some very good poker players. I had to explain this to them. I was saying, like, yeah, okay, like let's say there's 100 prizes and one of them is the big one, and you go up at the start, you have a 1% chance because it's definitely there and it's one of those 100. But if you wait for, let's say, 10 people, and 10% of the time one of them will pull out the big one, but the other 90% of the time you actually have a 1 in 90 chance now rather than a 1 in 100 chance. So it still works out at exactly 1%. But yeah, guys were convinced that, like, no, there's something wrong with that. And then there's other people who go come at it from the other way. They'd say, well, if you wait for like the first 10%, there's not much chance that anybody is going to pull it in the first 10%, and you increase your chances then because you're pulling from a smaller pile. It's just, it's bizarre how the human mind works on this stuff.
Oh, well, I was going to say that we all know what the maths is or the probability of it, but you can understand why the human brain kind of thinks that there must be a little bit of logic to that somewhere along the line. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's but this is obviously the fifth in a series. I mean, when you wrote the first one, did you ever think you'd get to book 5? I mean, is that what you hoped would be the case, or just it's just naturally gone that way?
The first book was literally just meant to be a one-off. It was Barry had written a piece about 10 years ago on poker books that should have been written that never were written, and one of them was a book on satellites. And then he thought after he brought out the piece that somebody would write a book on satellites, but nobody ever did. So then he thought, okay, well, why don't I be proactive and approach somebody who is very good at satellites and do a satellite book with them. So that was kind of the original impetus for the satellite book.
That's for anyone that's not seen it, that's the one, the first one. That's the satellite one.
Satellite strategy.
What I was going to ask about this, because it got a comment got made when we were watching the satellites last week on the show, and another reason why we wanted to get you on. How do you feel about the fact that people refer to it? Well, they've clearly read Dara's book. Look at the way they're playing that. They clearly got that. It's become very much kind of the Bible for how to win satellites. And people are saying, "Oh, I wish Dara had not told everybody how to win satellites. I used to be good at those, but now everybody knows how to do it."
Modern super system.
Yeah, it definitely changed satellites. That's for sure. And one of the reasons why I never wrote the book before I wrote the book was I was making so much money from online satellites.
Don't tell them.
And I had told a few people the secrets. I told David the secret and Dara Davey, who I was taking for a while. So there were a few players who I had told, and I could immediately see that like once people know this stuff, it makes it more difficult for me and everybody else. So that was a big disincentive to writing the book. But then when Barry came to me, I had kind of stopped playing online satellites anyway, because Stars had gotten rid of their $20 model, and they were only allowing people to qualify for everything once, which I think is still the case. So I was moving away from satellites, and I thought, okay, well, since I'm moving away from satellites, there's no harm in putting the secrets out there. As it happened, satellites did actually sort of go through a revival online. Party started their leaderboard. GG obviously came on, and they have lots of satellites now as well. So it's debatable whether I've cost myself more money than I made from the book at this point. But I think one of the reasons why satellites died on Stars or kind of died around the time that I wrote the book is that the gap between the players who knew the strategy, i.e. professionals, and players who didn't, who were mostly recreationals, was too big. And recreationals had kind of figured this out, and they stopped playing satellites. It got to the stage where, when I went on to play an EPT satellite on Stars, 8 of the 10 guys were the best satellite players, and there was only 2 random recreations in there. So they weren't really worth playing anymore. But what happened with the book, I think, is that lots of players read the strategy, and now they're actually competitive. They're able to play as well as the pros, or better than the pros who don't understand satellite strategy, who haven't looked into it specifically. So I think the book also helped sort of revitalize satellites online, which is obviously a good thing for anybody who likes playing satellites. When Barry came to me, like, he warned me. He said, like, this book won't make you rich because poker books don't sell very well. And he told me that, like, he told me the number that the average poker book sells, and he said, like, if we sell 500 copies, that's a bestseller in poker terms. So, like, we're not going to make a fortune on this. But the book sold so well, like, way ahead of all of our expectations, and it was such a fun experience as well. The most fun that came from writing that book was just random recreational players come up and saying, "Oh, I qualified for the Irish Open, or I qualified for an EPT, or I qualified for WSOP after reading the book," because I figured out what I was doing wrong in satellites up to that, and that was very rewarding. That was probably a bigger plus for me than anything else. So, and working with Barry was a very fun experience as well. So when we were finished the first book and it had done very well, much better than we expected, we thought, okay, well, we might as well do another book. And at the time, I was moving from playing normal tournaments to playing PKOs, which I had kind of resisted at the start because I don't like playing anything where I haven't worked out the strategy. So I said to Barry, "Well, I'm doing a pile of work anyway on PKOs, trying to work out what the correct strategies are."
So we're doing well. Yeah, we're doing well, right? PKOs. Yeah. There we go.
So since I'm going to be doing that work anyway and running lots of sims, we might as well write a book on it at the same time. And that book was a lot of fun too, because essentially that was me learning PKOs from scratch and then explaining them to Barry and turning it into a book. So again, that was a very fun experience. Book sold very well, so that encouraged us to keep going. And it was just a case of like whatever we wanted to write about. There was no real great thought about like, oh, if we write a book on ICM next, that'll sell really well, or if we write a book on whatever, that'll sell well. It was just like, what are we interested in? And when I finished the PKO book, the thing that I was most interested in was that there were a lot of really good players who were coming to me for ICM coaching because that was the one thing they were bad at. Because there was no great content out there on ICM at the time. There was certainly no book on it. So that was kind of the idea for the third book. It was like there's actually nothing on ICM really out there. There was a very good section of one of my favorite poker books of all time, Kill Everyone, which talked about ICM. But apart from that, there was almost no ICM content out there. And since I was known as an ICM expert, it seemed like, we could write the ICM book as well.
It's a tough read, I'll be honest, Dara.
Yeah, that is a tough read, yeah, for sure.
ICM is, and I'll be honest with you, the one I haven't got is the fourth one, is the game theory one, based on the fact that actually I found the end game a tough read because it's quite technical in what you're going through. It's good stuff, but it is quite quite heavy to actually get through and understand a lot of what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's definitely the most technical of all the books. There's no real other way to do ICM. It is a technical topic, so you can't sort of like dumb it down or anything like that. And yeah, a lot of people definitely struggle with the mathematical nature of that book. Conversely, that's the book that sort of online crushers, for want of a better word. That's the book that they
loved.
Rate the highest.
Yeah.
Because but it is a different thing. Yeah, like the GTO book is interesting because that's actually the simplest of the four books. If somebody asked me recently, like, if somebody was starting poker, which of the four books would you recommend? And the answer is definitely GTO Poker Simplified, because that's sort of it's the most general. It covers poker from an overall perspective. It's not just like specific to satellites. It's not specific to the end of tournaments. It's not specific to knockout tournaments or anything else. It's just poker in general. That this is a way of thinking about poker, and this is a way of making sure that you're playing a good strategy in every situation by having this thing. So that's actually the simplest of the four books. But I guess because of the order, because it came out after the most difficult book, people thought maybe this is going to be even more.
Yeah, you lost a sale from me, to be honest. But I will go and get it now that you've said that. I like I was talking to Barry about this the other day because and what I should say, guys, if you've put a question in the chat here, we're going to pick 3 of you at the end of the show, and we'll be sending you an ebook link so you can get your own copy of the latest one, Mystery Bounty Poker Strategy. So and keep a lookout on the Facebook group, because we've got another couple of the books that we'll give away during the week as well. So if you haven't got a question in, quick, get a question in, but we'll pick 3 before the end of the show to do that. But I was saying to Barry, he said, "Oh, do you want an ebook?" I said, "Oh, so I've got the paperback on order. It's on its way. Amazon are doing their business," because I still like thumbing through the pages and writing a few notes and adding some bits in of things I want to go back to, because there's sort of books that you will go back to something. You'll play a tournament and go, I need to just go and reread that again or re-understand that, because that I didn't, that doesn't make sense, or I didn't quite get that right. Was I doing that as the book kind of explains it? Although you can still play your own game, but obviously it's a good framework of how to play poker well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dara, Leigh and I had the absolute pleasure of doing a more in-depth style sit-down interview with you. Maybe it was last year. It might have even been a little bit before that, which we had a ton of fun with. It was really, really interesting. And it comes across to me that you're almost a perfectionist in everything that you attempt to do. You attempt to do it very deeply, very well. So whether that was academia or athletics or poker, authoring books, what is the next 5 to 10 years? Where will your focus go to? Will it continue to stay in poker, or are there elements of sort of, some of these new web technologies that have captured your imagination? Because again, I know tech was a very important part of your background as well. Where are you focused on going forward to maintain your challenge?
Yeah, it's still very much poker for me. I still absolutely love poker, and I love all the aspects of it as well. It's not just playing it. I love talking about it. I love commentating on it. I love writing about it. I love coaching other players. Probably the thing which I've done more of in the last year or two than I thought I would has been the coaching, because I was a very reluctant coach, and I don't like doing things. My attitude is always like, either do something really well or just don't do it at all. Don't sort of half-ass anything. And when I started coaching, it was in conjunction with a staking group that myself, David, Dara Davey, and Jason Tompkins had, where we were staking players and we would coach them as well. So we had weekly coaching sessions, and I was always kind of the guy who had to be dragged along grudgingly, didn't enjoy them. I also think I wasn't a very good coach at the time. There was an in-joke among the guys. My nickname was "It Depends," because that was pretty much my answer to every poker question that came up. It depends, which is probably the answer to most poker questions, but it's not. But when you're teaching people, they want something more than that. So, whereas David is a very good instructor, and Dara Davey very good as well. So I always felt that I'm not really carrying my weight. This isn't something I enjoy. But over the last few years, I've been coaching more and more private students, and I do think I've gotten better at it, because I've put a lot of thought into how people learn, the different approaches that work with different people. You can't teach a recreational player the same way that you would teach some online guy who runs 100 sims a day. So it actually became more interesting to me, because I realized how diverse it was, that essentially every person is different, and you have to they're like a puzzle. You have to figure out how do I teach this person, and then seeing them develop is also amazing. Like some of the people who came to me looking for coaching because they wanted to become professionals, they're now elite professionals, and seeing their success is very heartening. But then there are other people who came to me as recreational players, and there's one guy in particular, I'm not going to say his name, but his approach to me was like, I'm an absolutely terrible poker player, and I know that, and I don't think I'll ever be. I know I'll never be actually any good at poker, but I want to be just a bit less terrible. And he's probably the player who has improved the most of all the players I've coached. So it's been incredible to see his development as well. so that's probably the thing that I have been doing more of, and probably will do more of. But outside of poker, it's very difficult to say anything because nothing has really grabbed my attention yet. With poker, it's hard to know how long it's going to last. Like, that's the other thing. Like, there's been a lot of gloom and doom around poker for most of the time that I've been in it, where people are saying, "Oh, like, oh, it's only got another few years and then it's over." And for a lot of my career, I kind of thought, yeah, maybe that's the case. So I have to sort of make hay while the sun shines. This is something which, won't be around in 20 years. Might not even be around in 5 years. So just go really hard at it for the next however long. But now I kind of reached the stage where I realized, well, actually, no, live poker in particular is always going to be around. That's not going to disappear, at least not in my lifetime. And even all the gloom and doom around online poker, I think online poker is thriving now as well. I think I'm not really thinking outside of poker at the moment in terms of anything else I want to do, because what I do inside poker is sufficiently diverse between the writing, between the coaching, between the commentating, between the podcast and training videos and all the rest of it, that it doesn't feel oppressive in any way. It feels very diverse. But I think the bottom line is just, I absolutely love poker. Like, I get up every day excited to play, excited to think about it. Every day, either somebody sends me a problem I haven't thought about, or I have a spot that I haven't thought about myself, and I have to sort of go from basics. For me, it's basically like it's a puzzle which I'll never fully solve, but that makes it all the more engrossing.
That's a superb endorsement of where poker is today from, somebody who's hit it hard, for the last 10 to 15 years, really been sort of, deeply embedded in it. And you look at live poker, it seems to be in rude health at the moment. Ireland, so Irish poker open, very, very successful. You've got Finton, who's doing great things with the Irish Poker Tour. Even Jason has launched something with the APT recently in Ireland. Is it hard to bring new innovation into poker? Do you think, has the market got an appetite for, new things, whether be it live or online? And I mean, I'm tying that into a question that Simon has asked here. You're clearly following the trends in poker closely. What do you see as the next opportunity within poker?
Yeah, I do think live poker is absolutely booming now, and I guess in some ways it's a reaction to the pandemic. I think a lot of people had sort of drifted away from poker, and in the back of their mind they thought, well, poker will always be there, so I can come back at some point. And then, we were all stuck in our houses for a couple of years, and there was no live poker, at least in our part of the world. And so that made a lot of people appreciate it more when it came back. And it was notable to me that, like, when I go to tournaments in Ireland now, there are new players, guys who just maybe started playing online during the pandemic, and now want to play live. But there are also guys that I hadn't seen in 10 or 12 years who had sort of stopped playing, drifted away from the game, and now they're back playing. And that's great to see. It feels like everybody has sort of just rediscovered their love for it. I think it's super important that organizers focus on the right things. They focus on what people actually want, what recreational players want. I think a lot of the mistakes the poker industry has made has been sort of listening to the wrong voices. They've been listening to professionals. They've been asking professionals, well, what do you guys want? What will get you playing our event or on our tour, or on our site? And what professionals want is not the same as what recreational players want. And the focus has to be sort of on the recreational experience, making it as fun as possible. And that's why I think like mystery bounties in particular have been an absolute godsend, because they're just the most fun live events you can imagine. Like the buzz around when people are pulling the big bounties, and there's a big bounty to be won, and the whole hoopla around it just creates a great atmosphere. And I think anybody running events, that's kind of what you have to focus on. Like what do people actually want? And make sure you're listening to the right voices. Like, I'll give you an example. There was a time when organizers asked players what they wanted. They would say, "Oh, we want really good slow structures," and because of that, structures got slower and slower. And the reality is, like, when you look at the Irish Poker Tour, you can have an event which has 600, 700, 800 runners, and it has to be over in a day. So that can't be a slow structure. You can make it as good as possible within the confines of that, but it can't be a slow structure. That just doesn't work. But people prefer that to sort of like playing really long days, playing for 4 or 5 days, maybe playing for 2 days and not even cashing. That's not what recreationalists want. They want, you know, to be able to go in, play a tournament, and it's done in a day. So I think the organizers have gotten better at listening to the right people and basically understanding that it's recreational players and what they want, which should be driving their decisions.
You've got a long-standing relationship, yourself and David, with Unibet, who I think seem to have done a really good job of focusing on rec players. I mean, they redeveloped their online product, at a time when nobody else was doing that, to cater very specifically for rec players. They were ahead of the curve at that time. They took a big risk in doing that, and obviously a very successful live tour as well. How are they to work with? Do they listen to you guys? Do you think will they continually bring something new to the marketplace?
Yeah, no, Unibet have been an absolute delight to work with. That hookup actually started 2017, I think, and it was at the time myself and David had attended EPT Barcelona, where Stars made a lot of changes, which really didn't go across well with recreational players. They were paying out 20-25% of the field. There was just a lot of things about the festival that were bad and created a bad atmosphere. And we wrote blogs at the time saying, like, sites are losing their way here, going after trying to maximize profits from live events and not giving recreationals a good experience. And Unibet read the 2 blogs at the time, and they came to us saying, like, this is exactly this is our ethos. This is the way we see poker. We want it to be as fun. We want to create a great experience for recreational players. That's the focus. So since we've been working with them, that has always been the focus of Unibet. When they have a live Unibet Open, they don't care about attracting professional players or getting coverage of some high stakes cash game or any stuff that a lot of the sites have sort of focused on. They just want the recreational players to have as good an experience as possible, to enjoy the tournament, to have to have it in a nice place, so that even if they bust the tournament, at least they're on a holiday in a nice place, and to have lots of parties and other activities for them, and also to put together a side event schedule that they'll be able to afford to play. You know, a lot of the problems with some of the bigger tours like the EPT is that even as a recreational, if you do somehow satellite in, and then you get there and the cheapest side event is 500, and that's, you know, 5 times as much as you spent on your satellite to get into the main event, then you're not going to be, there's nothing else for you to play, basically. So the schedules have to be put together. So myself and David have been very focused on sort of, we talk to a lot of recreational players ourselves, and we get a sense of what they're looking for, and we pass that information on to Unibet then. And then on the online side as well, like, people don't want to be playing at 4:30 in the morning. They want the tournaments to be done by a reasonable time if they have work the following day. So we had a lot of input into the online schedule to make sure that the right buy-in level that people want to play, they last the right amount of time. They're not too long, but they're also not just crapshoots either. It's a kind of a balancing act, but it's all about, you know, listening to recreational players and figuring out what they actually want, because sometimes what they say they want is not what they actually want. Like, sometimes you'll ask people what they want and say, oh, we want a really good structure, and then you put on a really good structure and they go, oh god, the days were so long, and it was just too long for me. And it's like, yeah, but you asked for a really good structure. That's what a really good structure means. So it's not just a simple matter of like taking down what they say and passing that on. You kind of also have to interpret it, or sometimes interrogate it and say like, well, when you say you want this, what do you actually mean? And you sometimes see what tournaments do. Like people, the big bugbear would be always is that when you ask people what they want more of, they nearly always say, "Oh, we'd like more other games. We'd like more PLO, or we'd like." And then you put on a PLO tournament and 4 people show up. So it's another example of where like people say they want one thing, but they don't really. So I think it's very important to get a sense of what your customers are looking for.
Yeah.
And Unibet are great in that sense that they also don't mind us like playing on other sites, talking about other series that we're playing, etc., etc. We don't have to pretend that Unibet are the only site that exists in the world. And I think that helps us a lot on the chip race as well. Like, yeah, people know that Unibet sponsor us, and maybe we cover a few more Unibet stories as a result. But it's not a party political broadcast for Unibet. And again, I won't name any other names, but there are other sites that started podcasts, and they were nothing but a party political broadcast for the site. They only interviewed the ambassadors from that site. They only talked about things on that site. They only talked about their own live events. And nobody listened because everybody was like, "This is just advertising. This is all." The working relationship with Unibet has been very good for us because they haven't imposed any censorship on us. We can talk about anything we like. We can talk about what other sites are doing. We can be positive or negative. Some sites actually tell their ambassadors, "You don't say anything negative about another site because people will say you're just saying that because you're representing you're representing us." So you end up not being able to say anything positive or negative about anybody, which makes you like very, very bland. We've always been encouraged, just say what you think, and as long as it's your own opinion, make it clear it's your own opinion, that you're not talking for us when you give the opinion.
Well, here's an opinion I'm after, because we've been watching this satellite, and it might look like there's still the same 3 players that there were, but there aren't. There actually have been 5 others that have come and gone. But it's got 3 minutes left of late reg. It's still overlaying by nearly $15,000. There's one player that's just decided to sit in and have a go. Yeah. Here comes the second one. So how many are we going to get in the next 3 minutes that are going to jump into this? You're going to sit down with 10 bigs. Average stack is 22 bigs. Chip leader's got 46. There's 2 packages up for grabs.
Yeah, Shane Kelly thinks you should get in there, Dara. Get in quickly.
Yeah, this is exactly what happened. I think it was 2 weeks ago when I won my thing. This exact situation, I was like, "Oh my God, late reg is about to close, and there's still a huge overlay. I'm definitely getting in here, even though I'm only buying 10 bigs, or I might have only been 8 bigs, and most of the time I'm going to be out first hand." But it was still massively profitable. So,
but this is where I think the article was. I think was it Barry that wrote the article about your satellite win. I think it might well have been. Was explaining that actually. So you're buying in here now for $1,200, but the actual value of your chips is way more than the $1,200 that you're buying in for, isn't it? Basically, is the maths behind this?
Yeah, there's 2 aspects to it. First of all, when there's an overlay, like if you're an average player in a tournament that has 100K guaranteed, let's say, but only 80K in buy-ins, then your 1K, let's say you buy in for 1K, is actually worth $1,250 because there's 80 players in the tournament and you're 1 in 80 of those. So it's fairly simple maths. It's just 100,000 out of 80. So immediately you're getting 250 because of the overlay. The overlay is essentially divided up among all the players in the tournament. But the other thing is that there's an ICM benefit to coming in late, and it's actually bigger in satellites than in normal tournaments. We ran some calculations, I think, in the book on this, and in a typical scenario, if you max late reg a normal tournament, a non-satellite tournament, in other words, you get about a 20% ICM boost. So if you buy in, if it's $100 tournament, your $100 is actually worth $120 because of ICM. But in a satellite, it's often nearer to 140, 150. And then if you add an overlay on top of that, say the overlay is another 20 or 30. your 100 could actually be worth 170, 180. So you could actually be like a pretty bad player, a losing player. But because you're buying $180 of equity for only $100, even if you're losing, let's say 20% of that, $36, you're still coming out ahead. You're still going to win. So that's a lot of the that's where a lot of the profitability of playing online comes
So
from.
there's a few more piling in, and there's less than a minute to go to get into this.
Yeah, word's getting around, obviously.
Yeah, it's still overlaying by 10,000. I mean, the way, just to give you an idea on this, Des, if you buy into this now, I think if you won your first flip, double your stack, you'd be pretty much up there in the top three or so, 3 or 4 for 2 packages. Wow. So that's what you've got here. And all these guys that are buying in here now, 10,000 stacks, 6.7 bigs. You're basically looking to get your chips in and win your first hand, and then see where it leads.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the other thing. Like it's very easy to play. You won't have any complex decisions here. It's pretty much just push fold. But yeah, it's super profitable, and there will be guys. There's definitely guys who have the lobby open, and they have a number in their mind. If it overlays by more than this amount, then I'll jump in. But if it it
is jumped from 8 runners to 18 runners in with 2 minutes to go.
So I guess you have to be careful you don't jump too soon, or else you're going to end up in a 30 or a 40 runner event, and your edge is somewhat less.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also the case that actually as you get shorter, it's better to have 8 big blinds than 10 big blinds, and it's better to have 10 big blinds than 15 big blinds because you have more profitable shoves with the shorter your stack is. So that's a misconception I think a lot of people have. They say, well, you're only coming in with 8 big blinds, so is that not a mistake? And my answer is always if I could come in with 1 ante, I would, because that would be an amazing spot.
And that's all you need to do. You see, first hand, both these players, kings versus nines, bang, double up now, and you're in the game now, looking to go on and win a package. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. But I'm guessing this is how the one that you played was very similar in style.
This is clearly the equivalent of the one I played, because it was. I think there was 2 packages in that one.
Run good, Des. Ace King versus King Jack. Course 2 jacks on the flop for you. That's what you want, isn't it?
Oh, wow. Keeps him in the hunt. Simon Lawler has asked this question of you, Dara. Did you play the 1K flip and go at the World Series? If you did, how many bullets would you fire?
I didn't play it last time. I think maybe because I just wasn't there. I mean, there is some edge in them in the sense that if you do win your flip, then you're playing against, on average, weaker players than you would in a normal tournament. Because in a normal tournament, on average, the field gets tougher the deeper you go into it, because the weaker players are more likely to be knocked out than the good players at any point. But that's not true at the first stage of a flip and go, obviously. So. But yeah, I didn't play. I'm still a bit leery of the format. It's just a little bit too much like random gambling to me, and I'm not a gambler by instinct at all. My whole the attraction of poker to me is not the gambling; it's the strategy.
Well, Leigh, I'm getting this sense of Dara wearing a hood-style helmet in a future world, measuring absolutely everything in front of him. Decided, do I go left? Do I go right? Based on the stats. Crikey. What a life.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way I view the world. I mean, for me, like, everything is maths. and it's been that way since I was a kid. Like, I've always kind of seen maths as the language of the universe, that maths underlies everything. There's maths in every situation, and figuring out what the maths is interesting to me. But like I've been in Vegas a few times, and friends have dragged me along to play roulette or craps or whatever, and I just absolutely hate the experience.
Don't enjoy that
because there's no maths there. Well, there is maths. You just know that you're losing 3% every time the wheel is turned. That's the only maths. And that's just miserable to me. I don't get any thrill or excitement from the sort of like the gambling aspect. I'm far too analytical for that. The first time I went, it was my friend Elena, the groupie online, and she wanted to go and play craps. Was it craps? No, sorry, it wasn't craps. It was blackjack. And I didn't know how to play blackjack, but she explained the strategy to me. So there is at least a strategy with blackjack, and I found it quite interesting. And trying to work stuff out as well on the fly. So at least there was something to think about. But then the second night, she said, "Let's go and play roulette." And we went to the roulette table, and I swear to God, worst 20 minutes of my life. I was just miserable. Every time we put down a bet, I was just thinking, that's 3% of that bet. That bet is minus EV by 3%. We put down $100. We've got $97 in EV. There goes another $3. There goes another $3.
Could you not have even just worked out basically, compounded down your 3% as to when actually you could walk away from the table?
yeah. Well, after 20 minutes, I was like, this isn't fun. I'm sorry, Elena, you're on your own now. I was able to cope with the blackjack, but my son came out one year too, and my son is even less into gambling than I am. But he had got it into his head that as part of the Vegas experience, he had to gamble somehow. So he went to the roulette table, and he was betting $1 a time or whatever, and he was just losing. And he decided he was losing this $100 anyway, so he wasn't upset about it or anything. It was just like this was something he had to do while he was in Vegas. And then I think he got down to like $50 or whatever, but he won his next one, so now he was back up to $100. And he wasn't happy. He was like, "Oh shit, it's going to take even longer to lose this money now." And I was like, you're allowed to walk away anytime you want. You don't have to lose the money.
No, I've only ever played roulette twice, and I very much take the rule of it's double it, walk away, or lose it, and you're there for a bit of fun, supposedly with friends, and that's about it. And say twice in my life I've played roulette. It's not
if it's fun for you, then that's fine. Like I'm not saying people aren't allowed to have fun. It's just that I'm not. It's not fun for me personally.
No, I don't. I've never played. The only table game I play in is Paiga, is the Chinese poker that's a very slow burner of money, and if you're with friends, it can be quite a social one to be at.
Yeah. From actually, if you are going to gamble on something like roulette, which is minus EV, obviously, the best thing you can do is actually just place one bet in your entire life, because then it doesn't compound against you.
Yeah.
And you can say you've done it. Yeah.
Well, very quickly, that 80 or the 3 jumped back up, and we're down to 7 now. 2 of these are going to grab a seat. I mean, it's fast and furious. This is, if you do late reg into this, I think Dara's 21 minutes is probably not going to be a million miles off where this one's going to actually run if you've late regged it. It's going to be done fairly quick. I mean, do these type of satellites, obviously, if you bankroll to be able to have a go at $1,200, great. For a recreational poker player that's maybe satellited up through the $15 to the $125 to the $1,200 to play this, and it might be their one shot at this.
Yeah.
With all these guys piling in, I mean, it's not great for them, is it?
It's not a great experience, but actually, in terms of like improving your chances, it's probably the best thing, because the edges of the pro are not massive. They're just like they know which hands they're supposed to shove with and which hands they're not. But at the end of the day, there's still going to be like a lot of all-ins, and you're going to have to win your all-ins. It's one of those scenarios where like you often hear recreational players say they want good structures, good slow structures, and they think that gives them an advantage in some way. But like it's a zero-sum game. Everybody doesn't get an advantage from a good structure. The better players do, and the weaker players actually would be much better off if it was a crapshoot.
Yeah.
So from a recreational point of view, like if you're playing against players who are more skilled, because they're professionals or whatever, it's actually better to have like everybody have 6 big blinds, rather than everybody has.
Well, that was what I was going to say. So where these satellites at the end of these are dropping down, and it's pretty much a case of the decisions that you're having to make are very simple. in what you're doing. For a recreational poker player in this situation where you've got, I mean, I'm sure if I click on some of these guys here, they are going to have won hundreds of thousands on GG. You can obviously click on their stats and have a look. And we had some last week that were millions. And, as a rec, then actually it kind of levels the playing field a little bit.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. It does level the playing field, and it makes the luck aspect more important, which gives the recreational players a better chance. And I think the sites have kind of realized that as well. Like the sites are always thinking about formats where the recreations aren't at too much of a disadvantage, and they're trying to avoid formats where they are. And for example, the format where recreational players are at a terrible disadvantage and will almost certainly lose their money is heads up. And when I started playing online poker, all the sites offered heads up, and a lot of the economy was based on heads up. But the problem with heads up is the better players will win pretty much always, so long as the structure is anyway half decent, or they're playing deep stack cash games. The recreation has very little chance of winning. So that's why the sites have pushed heads up poker less and less, because they've kind of realized, people deposit, they lose their money very quickly, they have a bad experience. Whereas, if you get them playing, for example, PKOs, the great thing about PKOs are, first of all, it's a kind of a gambly format anyway, and that's fun. But also, if you knock somebody out, you get some money back. So your deposit will last longer, rather than you sit down at a heads up table with a guy who's much better than you, and it's gone in 20 minutes. And I think the sites have kind of figured out. People sometimes say like, well, why are these satellites? Why are the structures so bad at the end? But it's actually in the interest of the recreational players that they be more sort of gambling.
I hadn't really thought. I've been saying to people for a little while, I'm not sure about these structures, but actually now you've explained that, and actually as we've talked through the show, that makes a lot of sense. It really does.
Well, I tell you what, guys, look, we're coming up on 2 hours. Dara, I have to say, it's flown by for us. It's been absolutely fantastic, brilliant.
I'm hoping you're still in some poker tournaments there, Dara. Yeah,
I am. Yeah,
yeah, good man. Yeah.
I'm sort of nervous to say, Dara, there's probably a list of things here that we just haven't talked about at all. I've got at least 3 videos that I wanted to run by you. We could probably do this for another 2 hours, but I suspect that isn't going to work. It's just been an outstanding sort of 2 hours to spend with you. There's such a lot of really good content coming across there. If the guys wanted to approach you for training, or if they wanted to connect with your blog, or the streams that you do with David, I mean, what's the easiest way for them to do that?
Yeah, I guess Twitter is kind of my central hub where everything I do, I put it on Twitter at some point, or at least a mention of it. I also have my own website these days, DaraO'Kearney.com, which lists all of the different things, all of the different projects I'm involved with, Chip Race, for AsJacketTraining.com, etc., etc. So that's also a good place to go. And if you, it also gives you my contact details if you want to talk to me about coaching or anything else.
Superb. So, guys, we'll put that out there, DaraO'Kearney.com, to connect with Dara, or indeed, if anybody's come away from the show, feel strong you want an intro or whatever, give Leigh and I a sort of a nudge, and we'll put you in touch with Dara also. Dara, just thank you for 2 hours. Appreciate in particular that you're playing there in the background. It's probably not optimal to be talking to us in the depth that you have done for the 2 hours. So we really appreciate your time
thank you.
in that.
Than's, guys. Pleasure.
Excellent stuff. So what I would say is, Dara's latest book is out. I already have it here. You can get it from Amazon, Kindle, or paperback is available. We have got some ebooks that we said we were going to give away. I've done a quick draw. So congratulations to Barry Cullen, Tom Clark, and Simon Allen. 3 of you, I will get you links sent so you can go and download your own copy of the ebook. That's the 5th in the series. So if you do want to catch up on any of the others, I'm going to go and buy the GTO one now. So I've got the complete collection on the bookshelf. So I feel bad. And as I'm off to Vegas next month, that'll be that can be my reading whilst in Vegas. So we'll check that one out. And I'll be hunting you down, Dara. Just explain this bit again. I don't get this.
Or even better, Leigh, even better, it didn't work.
It
didn't work, Dara. It didn't work.
Because you'll do refunds, whilst we're in Vegas. Yeah, that won't be a problem. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Okay, thanks, guys.
So thanks again to Dara. Thanks to all of you guys who tuned in tonight through a lot of questions. That was really appreciated. That we didn't get to all of them, but we got to as many as we could. Good luck to you playing through next week. And of course, don't forget Nottingham from Wednesday. UK COAP kicks
We didn't
off.
even touch. We didn't discuss
any
the
of
UK COP. I mean, let me quickly before we do go, just say anyone that is still tuned in here. So tomorrow night is the online day one for the UK Championships at dusk till dawn. So if you want to play the online one, you can play that on GGPoker tomorrow night. £120 buy-in, 8 o'clock. If you get through day one, you're already in the money for day two, which is on the Sunday at the club. If you want to play one of the other 4 live day ones, they're on Thursday, Friday, and 2 on Saturday. So loads of opportunities to get through for the Sunday. But of course, the main event is just one of 7 events we've got at dusk till dawn from Wednesday till Sunday. Bit of something for everybody there. Triple stud, horse, PLO, high roller. There's a bounty there as well. Deep and steep. Loads to do there. So you can buy in for any of those via Luxon Pay. Or at the dusk till dawn cash desk from Wednesday. Clubs open an hour before the tournament start. We're there from Wednesday right through. Tom, Des, and myself. Can't wait.
Absolutely superb. Okay, guys, I'm sure we're going to bump into you, a lot of you, at some point next week. So until then, have a great few days. Thanks a lot, guys.